Wednesday night rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. Team of us. Everyone in.
Now for some rugby chat of a Wednesday evening. Let's check in with Keith Wood. You're there?
Of a Wednesday. How are you doing, Joe? Are you well?
Very well, very well. Liam Toland also with us, Liam?
Good as gold, Joe.
Great. So we have Pro 14 quarterfinals, even though there are only two of them, but we'll move past that this weekend. Munster against Bennett on Saturday, 3 o'clock, with the winners facing Leinster at the RDS. And then Ulster Connacht should be a really good game up in Belfast. Also Saturday, 5:35, the winners will face Glasgow away. The interesting news out of Munster this week, Keith, is that they are looking for a new attack coach. It seems as well that Felix Jones will stay on. And we know Van Gran has been hands-on in that respect as well when it comes to the Munster attack. I mean, you couldn't class this as a direct response to the Saracens' performance. One suspects that the wheels were in motion already and that they were thinking along these lines already. But certainly the Saracens' performance, along with other previous semi-final performances in Europe, won't have dissuaded them of the need to improve in this area, that's for sure.
No, I think not. But I think if we go back to your first point, this isn't an immediate reaction. And equally well, I would say Munster are kind of a couple of numbers down in coaching staff. When you see the numbers that are in Leinster at the present moment in time, I think Van Gran is having to do a lot of different jobs at once. And I think with the way rugby keeps changing all the time, the numbers expand forever. And I think Munster may be a little bit light in terms of that. So too many guys sharing a large workload, maybe.
So your read isn't certainly at the moment, isn't that Van Gran wants his hands across everything? It's more of actual a stretching of the coaching staff, maybe.
Yeah, I think so. I think that was the case and has been the case for the last number of years. And it's now along the lines of trying to get the whole coaching set up fit for purpose.
So Chris Farrell was talking, Liam, and he's certainly of the opinion that it's the key area they need to improve on. It's not breaking news, I think, to most of us, really, and we've talked about it a lot, but it's interesting to have a Munster player talking so openly about their attack. He said, I think we can do it more than we're doing at the moment, as attack well, that is. I think we can do it more so than we're doing at the moment. Even in terms of just using me as a distributor or someone just to suck in defences, eventually teams realise that I may be used to get momentum and they'll start to see that and adjust their defences. We can definitely find space outside of me or behind me. And then on attack generally, he said, it's the last aspect of our game that really needs to kick on and really needs a little bit of work because everything else is so good. One thing that we need to develop as well is our forwards being on the same page as our backs. That's pretty well put from Farrell, I would think, Liam, pretty honest.
Yeah, I think it was, and I didn't see the game against Saracens live. I was away, so the first thing I did is I went to look at the statistics of the game. It's interesting when you see the results and then look at the stats, having not watched the match, what can you learn from it? And I was amazed with how many people accepted that Saracens were a far better team and that's why Munster lost. But if you look at the statistics as I did without having watched the match, you'll see other things. You'll see that Munster had 42% of possession and Saracens had 58%, yet the kicking stats were very equal. I think Saracens only had 3 extra kicks. So it's what Munster are doing with the ball. And if you look at last weekend when Munster and the Connacht game, it was a damp squib in many, many ways. But if you look at the stats, Munster kicked the ball 22 times, and in Leinster, I know they lost up in Ulster, it kicked 10 times. So in lots of cases, it's what Munster are doing with the ball when they have it and maximising their resources and their skill set. And I agree with Chris Farrell, and if you compare him to Stuart McCluskey and the damage he did in combination with the Ulster backline against Leinster, and that's in the European game that they lost, obviously, you could see the value of a midfield that's really functioning well in Ulster. And I, at times, struggle to see the rugby template that Munster are bringing. You know, if you look at the Pat Lam side of 2016, you can see a definite style and tactics and strategies that are at play. You understand Leinster in many ways, they can do nearly it all in whatever suits them. But at times you struggle to see, well, what are Munster trying to do? What are they trying to do to expose the opposition? And that's the piece of the jigsaw that we have over the last few weeks, Joe, have been talking about. You know, when we were coming into the Saracens game, I was suggesting that this Munster team there's no reason outside of the style they decide to play that they cannot beat Saracens in many, many ways. And a lot of that goes down to how they're using the ball, how they tackle the ball, how they're putting pressure on it. And you look at someone like Keith Earls, who At times it takes a minor miracle for the ball to come to him, and when it does, you can see his quality. But oftentimes it isn't being orchestrated to get him in advantageous position like other teams are trying to do.
Yeah.
And certainly Benetton are a side that can test that. They maximise their resources. They're still a little bit short of Munster, but they are an example of, you can see their style, but sometimes I struggle with Munster.
And I presume when you did sit down to eventually watch the Saracens game, you were muttering something about lies, damn lies and statistics.
Yeah, but no, there's lots of other things that factor into that, of course. The couple of players missing, the referee's interpretation, the breakdown, all that other stuff. But the fundamental, what do Munster do when they have the ball? And an example of that was last weekend. And sometimes you learn more from when you watch the second string side play, because you know that they're implementing a game plan that's part of the overall structure. So Munster had a line out on the halfway line against Connacht in Thomond Park, and it threw to the front, which was a little unusual. It wasn't the best of line-outs. It went to deck, and Neil Cronin, who came on late, as we know, box kicked it. And nothing wrong with that in a sense. But you're on the halfway line. Why are you box kicking it? Is that a team tactic? Is that a strategy? Is there no other way of regenerating, go forward from that? And lots of times, the statistics tell me that that's a go-to play. It has been, and we've seen the value of it. But in the absence of other options as well, and we see the likes of Leinster and Saracens are able to recreate go-forward ball off that type of crappy ball without resulting in a box kick, and you can see that in the stats.
Yeah, so Keith, as well as Munster have done, maybe lacking a template is the key point Liam's making there.
I think they're lacking a bit of consistency, and the last part of Chris Farrell's point was they need to fully have the forwards and the backs on the same page.
Yeah.
I think that is something that sticks out very heavily for me. I really want to see the Munster forwards carry the ball at pace and get over the gain line. They haven't been doing an awful lot of that, and so that's something that has to be definitely has to be worked on, and that level of integration between forwards and backs.
Yeah.
But when I keep going back looking over it, and it's hard sometimes, and I don't want to be overly defensive here on behalf of Munster in terms of it, but I'm trying to go back to almost the idea of being as a player yourself, and you're trying to look at different things that happen. The level of consistency in the back line in particular for Munster has been very, very low, and it's been low for a variety of reasons. Guys have been injured. They come back in, they're in for a week, then they're gone to Ireland camp, then they're back for a week. They're not getting a run in a period of time. And that works okay when you have a core team that's functioning very well and you have a strength and depth for the second or third players that are in there that are fully tuned in, fully tuned up and able to function properly. For Munster, it hasn't been. Every game has been a huge game that it's almost needed a full side to get out onto the field. Yeah. Whether that's for a lack of trust in some of the players that are further down the line, or the fact that there's a knowledge there that because of maybe the lack of depth in certain positions, you need the frontline guys to get out there to get that win. Because like Munster have done well, but not as well as they would have liked it. But they're still in the shot for another trophy. Yeah. They have a couple of matches to get to a final. If they can do that, can they get can they beat Leinster in a semi-final? Is that possible? Well, they've beaten Leinster already this year, and that's not grasping at straws. That just happens to be the case that they have done that. So there's still an awful lot to play for. But I think without a shadow of a doubt, sometimes comparing like with like is tough. Leinster are on a high at the moment and have been for the last couple of years.
Yeah, no, there's no doubt. And Conor Murray, in a recent interview with ourselves, even made that point that sometimes you can suffer by comparison with your neighbours up the road when you have to look at them in a European light. On the consistency point, though, so I think you're getting at the fact that they're not maybe playing together enough. There's a lack of continuity, but actually, and so that's an issue. But like they don't need consistency. Munster don't need consistency. They're getting to semi-finals consistently. What they actually need is their peak performance to jump up several notches. Like Leinster haven't been consistent over the last month or two, but actually when it comes to it, they can hit a peak, and it's knockout rugby.
No, and I get that. And the point I'm saying is is a consistency of performance to be able to push it further out at the end. And I don't think they've been able to do that. So Conor Murray has suffered for a period of time. Joey Carberry joins. We see a high level of excitement with him there. And you suddenly say Conor Murray, Joey Carberry, Farrell, Keith Earls are 4 players that would light up any team.
Could you argue, and I know I'm being a nuisance interrupting you, could you argue if there was a proper template there that players could fit in and peak for those bigger games? Like, look at the numbers that came back for the Toulouse game for Leinster.
No, I get that. And I think that Leinster is a far more stable for a longer period of time than Munster is. So that's the argument I'm having with it. I think we'll get to see that hopefully for the rest of the season, but also for next season. And there's an awful lot more has to be worked on to do it. These things don't happen overnight. And so, look, I would look at it. I named 4 players in particular, and they've been injured for an awful lot of the season. And just when it got to the period of time when Carberry had totally bedded in, brought the fans over to him very well, setting the place alight. Farrell gets injured. Conor Murray is injured. Then the 2 guys get back. Carberry's out. Keith Earls is injured. You know, so it isn't as if then there's a line of 5 guys behind Keith Earls, and it's also confidence. There's different confidence in the 2 teams. If you look at Leinster and Munster, there's a different confidence. But so for me, I like looking at the way Leinster are playing at the moment. They're playing with a level of high confidence, even with different players that are coming in. So I'm not disagreeing with your point. I just think it's at a different point in the cycle. Okay,
Liam, final word on Munster.
Yeah, I think there was a great try that Tadhg Beirne scored against Connacht, and it was almost Leinster-esque in many ways, because Jean Klein ran a brilliant line selling the fact he may get the ball, and the Connacht defence for a moment were caught not knowing who was getting it. It landed in Tadhg Beirne's hand, and you saw the little goose step, and he scored a try. That's something we take for granted when we watch Benetton play, when we watch Leinster play, Connacht play, and you don't see it often enough for Munster. The players themselves, I feel, have the skill set and the ability, but they're not just doing it. And maybe that's a bit what Chris Farrell is talking about, the interaction between backs and forwards. And if you think of someone like Tadhg Furlong or Scott Fardy at Leinster, they're contributing in those subtle plays that create indecision in the defence. Like, there's no doubt in terms of consistency. Munster had 77 points at the end of the closed season. They were Leinster at 76. So Munster would have, in theory, would have won the Conference B. They have a massive points differential of positive. So they're doing hugely positive things in the Guinness Pro 14. But when it gets to playing against the 2 best sides in Europe, which happen to be Leinster and Saracens, the style of game that's providing them the positivity in the conferences isn't getting them across. And that's the bit that they need to evolve. We've been saying it consistently, and it's the exciting part, which is well within them.
Yeah, well, listen, they should be commended for bringing in a new attack coach and a new voice, and that could really add something as opposed to saying, no, everything's fine here. Our rugby coverage is with thanks to Vodafone, Team of Us, everyone in, and you can get in your Heineken Star comments. I know lots of you watching at the moment on Facebook and YouTube and Twitter. Mike O'Mara is watching on Facebook. Wishing Toland a very happy 50th from all in the Mallow Street Wine District.
Well, I think I'll leave Keith Wood to answer that, because that's a hooker-to-hooker compliment there, no doubt. Thank you, Mike.
Well, look, we can give him a plug. That's the Wine Buff on Mallow Street in Limerick. He was the most magnificent schoolboy hooker back in 1989, which is aging us all. He played with Toland and treated Toland with the disrespect he deserved all the time, which I liked, you know.
Well, Toland is looking remarkable for 50, so good on you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Connacht away to Ulster is going to be good, Keith. I think that's the game of the weekend by some distance.
I think it's a great game. I think Connacht are they're in fine fettle, and I was trying to figure this out recently, whether because the level of expectation for Connacht just isn't as high, because they have always been the sort of the lesser of them, and don't take any offence from that. That's just been where they've been for a while. Then they go and win a Pro 14, which is amazing. Then they have a struggling year the year after, but they play with a level of freedom that I think is fantastic. And I'm trying to figure out why that is. Is it to do with the coaches that they've had? Is it to do with just that level of expectation that sits around the team? I think it would be very tough for them. and will be tough for them to go up north and get the win, because I actually think Ulster have, ever since they got beaten. Was their last defeat against Connacht? Was it or they got wherever their last defeat was? They've bounced back with a chunk of wins. Look confident, look comfortable. Have players back from injury. Some of the young guys have got a bit more experience, but they both play with a sense of freedom. So I think this is a very interesting game. I still think it's Ulster to win.
How do they compare, Keith, to the Pat Lam vintage?
If I'm to be honest, I rather how they play now.
Okay.
And the under Pat Lam, it was more attractive and it was winning. And I look, without taking things away, and it's very hard because this always sounds as a criticism. That was in a post World Cup year, or in a World Cup year. There was players in and out in some of the other provinces. There were very little in Connacht, and Connacht ran everybody ragged. They did a brilliant job, and it was an improbable run all the way up. And we kept saying, that's fine. What they're doing is amazing. They're not going to win, but this is amazing, fantastic. And then they went on to win, which was an extraordinary year for it, I suppose, themselves and Leicester City. You know, there were extraordinary runs. Unlike Leicester City, they had a dip, but they've come back, and they've come back strong. I think Andy Friend is a guy that suits them. And so they have a skill set and they have a willingness, and there are a lot of guys that have been brought to the club to run the ball left, right, and centre. But I think there's a little bit more structure now. And I thought at times watching Connacht was fantastic, but foolhardy. And now I think they look like they're a very pragmatic team. So for me, as a rugby fan who wants them to try and be at the top table all the time, this is the type of rugby I want to see play. Andy
Friend, certainly in good humour in the build-up to this game, Liam. We've played some really good rugby. We showed that against Treviso. When we needed to win, we did. Against Ospreys, we needed to deliver, and we did. And Cardiff, we did as well. I reckon the players are ready, and that's the most exciting thing. But I've said a few times, I still don't think we've played our best rugby yet. And then he was saying they have about 46 players fit at the moment. There's a great atmosphere. In the month of April, we've had 30 players who've hit personal bests, whether it's on speed, in the gym, or body composition. And of those 30 players, they've had 53 personal bests amongst them. So certainly for this time of year, they're peaking as opposed to withering, if you take Pat Lam or Andy Friend rather at face value.
Yeah, and I think that the massive importance is that they're 9, 10, 12 and 13. If they get Marmion or indeed Blade starting, Carthy, Tom Farrell and Bundy Aki playing, they have as good a chance as any outside. I think Tom Farrell is a guy who played for Lansdowne, won the All-Ireland League a few seasons ago. I think he's of crucial importance, himself and Carthy at 10 and 12. When the Connacht played Ulster twice this season, and obviously you're in playoff territory now. So if Ulster bring the intensity and the game plan they did against Leinster in the Aviva a few weeks back, well then any team is going to struggle. That said, I couldn't believe it. Ulster missed 51 tackles in those two fixtures against Connacht. In the most recent one in December, they missed 28 tackles to Connacht's 11. All the other statistics are somewhat similar. So Connacht are doing something, and it ekes back into our chat about Munster. Connacht are doing something with the ball that is forcing indecision and bad decisions by the defenders, and they're missing tackles. And I think someone like Tom Farrell at first centre, along with Jack Carthy, Marmion and Bundy Aki, how those four players work off each other is really interesting to watch. And whether Connacht have enough to beat them, and I think they can do, those four will be the key to unlocking all sorts of opportunity. And in particular, Tom Farrell, I thought he played brilliantly any time I've seen him throughout the season. So it's going to be a really, really interesting clash. And certainly Andy Friend looks like a guy who's injected a whole confidence into his team where anything is possible, as opposed to the previous coach who focused in on all the negatives and all the stuff that wasn't possible. I think Friend has completely flicked that on its hinges, and the likes of Jack Carthy are revelling in the atmosphere.
Yeah, Connacht did have a man advantage for the second half against Ulster up in Belfast, but I certainly take the point that you're making. And on Marmion versus Caelan Blade, how live a debate is that for you, Liam? Jack Carty was saying during the week Kieran Marmion is the fastest player at Connacht, which I couldn't actually believe. He's hitting 10.7 metres per second when he gets his gas up, which is fairly phenomenal. Marmion and Blade,
That sounds like Mike O'Mara and the Wine Buff type of pace, to be honest. But I was, again, watching Kieran Marmion play against Munster.
Yeah.
The speed at which he arrives to the breakdown is very impressive. The speed at which he just flicks the ball away to the oncoming 10 is very, very impressive. I'm not familiar to his straight line running, but the pace at which the ball arrives to the 10 is almost stringer-like. That all said, Blade is a wonderful player too. Like, these two guys are real quality players, and if one of them comes off and the other comes on, it is of no loss or impact or negative impact to Connacht. Marmion is a super player. He's come through his injuries and that, but that was the distinct, you could see it in the opening 20 minutes in Toland Park last weekend. He was the key player that set a totally different tempo around, and definitely you get a sense that his coach is giving him permission to tap the ball, run around the fringes, test the fringes. The problem for Connacht as the game against Munster went on was, as his teammates fatigued, he wasn't being given the same options, and without those options his runs were useless because there was Munster players weren't being fixed or distracted by anybody else. So his game, his impact and his influence ebbed away after about 30 minutes. That was no fault of his own, as his teammates were beginning to fatigue. But he's a quality player with lots of pace. But watch the speed in which the ball arrives to the out-half's hands, and that's the key speed. All the other speeds are irrelevant in many ways.
Okay. So is Jack Carty having everyone on when he says 10.7 metres per second? There's no way.
I think it's irrelevant. I think the only thing that's relevant for Scrum-half is the speed with which Jack Carty gets the ball from the breakdown, and that's the only relevance. If your man happens to be very, very quick, it's helpful because if he does have the half break, but that has to come when his outside forwards are distracting the fringe defenders off the rucks. If they're not doing that, then that pace is useless to him too. But it's a nice commodity to have.
It is, yeah. For Ulster, no Jacob Stockdale is a blow. They're wrapping up him in cotton wool, and we're expecting to see a patched up and probably very emotional Rory Best for his last game up in Belfast. Ulster 14, Leinster 13 was a pretty interesting watch over the weekend, and Donncha O'Callaghan on Air Sport, Keith, I mentioned this to Matt Williams on Monday, but it was kind of the defining thing I took from the game, and he was saying Ulster have really sorted out their set piece and those basics, and right from the first minute, that rolling maul exit, you could really see what O'Callaghan was pointing out. They're in a good place, and you sense they're starting to believe in each other again and believe in the coach, and they're definitely emerging from a fairly grim 12, 18 months. And I presume even they took a lot from that Leinster defeat in the quarter-final of Europe.
I would have thought so. I think that they were in a position to win and didn't win, obviously. The comments about Stockdale and not grounding the ball in that period of time. And that's something that's very hard for them to deal with. But they're in the position to do so. And look, we talked earlier on about Leinster and Saracens being the two top teams in Europe, and they absolutely are. And to be at that table and to pressurise them as much as they possibly could, I think they'll go away being really upset about it. But it doesn't seem to have deflated them either. They still seem to be in a good space. I was just trying to go back to your figure of 10.7 metres per second.
Yeah.
So how do we know that that's of any good value? As whether that's fast or not fast, it's just a number. So
apparently it makes him the fastest in Connacht, Jack Carty said, but I feel you have backup numbers here.
Well, no, I'm not. I've no idea. So I've only just flicked on something here.
Go on.
Now, foot speed for Wikipedia, the record is 27.8 metres or miles per hour. Oh, that's miles per hour as opposed to metres per second. There's one for you.
Yeah.
So I'm looking at the other one. So I just want to know whether that's fast or not, because we could always put any number and say
it is.
It
is fast. It was the fastest GPS at Connacht all year.
Yeah.
10.7. So he's faster than anyone.
I think it's very safe to say he's fast.
Yeah, I think let's conclude that. We'll conclude that. Are you both tipping Ulster ultimately here? Connacht, obviously, their first win in 60 odd years already this year up in Belfast, but home advantage is generally telling at these times.
I think so. From my part, I think it's 2 home wins this weekend.
Liam?
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to Bennett, and I think they're not going to win the game, but they're bloody great to watch. And I think, again, from Connacht's point of view, I'd be more 50-50 on this. And if, going back to the pace of Marion, if the ball arrives to Carty quickly, just keep an eye out on how Tom Farrell and Bundy Aki work off each other's shoulders. They create so much damage, the two of those guys. But I think it could be 2 home wins. But I'm really looking forward to the visiting teams testing the home teams.
Okay, super stuff. Lads, we'll leave it there. Thanks, Mel.
Thank you.
Great. Cheers, lads. Bye.
Wednesday Night Rugby on Off the Ball.
With Vodafone, official sponsors of the Irish rugby team. Team of us, everyone in.